Good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday, November 17th, 2022. My name is Paula Nettleship, and I would like to welcome you on behalf of the Association of Pittsburgh Priests. If you're unfamiliar with APP, we are a diocesan-wide organization of women and men responding to God's baptismal call for renewal in ourselves and our church, welcoming and including all for a world of mercy, justice, and peace. Our speaker series is part of that ministry, and this evening's presentation is Taking Action and Implementing Laudato Si, What Holds Us Back, with Kat Doyle, who is the Director of Justice and Peace Ministries for the Archdiocese of Atlanta.
Well, what I'd like to do to get started really at this point is to talk to you about the barriers to implementing a Laudato Si action plan. And I've lived in both the North, the South, the West, the East Coast and all that. And I do speak pretty quickly. I do try to enunciate, but if I'm going too fast, somebody jump in and wave your arms and let me know you need me to slow down a little. But I have a ton to share with you tonight. And the first thing that I want to share with you is really why I'm talking to you. Like, why is Kat Doyle, of all people, speaking to you tonight? And I have made a list of things that might make sense. First of all, I bring a very unique perspective on the successes and the failures that we've experienced in Atlanta, which are both deep and broad. As well, we were the first that we know of in the entire world to make a diocesan Laudato Si action plan. And 7 years later, we've updated our Laudato Si action plan. We both republished it, a small amount in paper, and we made an e-version of that. It's in English and in Spanish. We've also shared our Laudato Si action plans with everyone. Our first one was hand delivered to the Pope. Our newest one, the Vice President of Delta Airlines and his wife hand delivered it to the Pope when they met with him this summer. So we have literally pushed it out to anybody and everybody that's interested in taking a look at it. And if any of you want to see it, it is on the Archdiocese of Atlanta's website. I also, as was mentioned, was really tapped to be the U.S. representative for all the dioceses in the United States for the Vatican's Laudato Si Action Platform Diocesan Working Group. Also, one of the things that I have been able to do is find donated funds so that I can actually fund 2 part-time Laudato Si initiative contractors. And as far as we know, that concept and the way we're doing that is another first. We were the Laudato Si initiative was the recipient of our Archbishop's annual appeal. And the reason for that is that we spent literally 6 years working on this, and not a dime, not even a penny was contributed by the Archdiocese. We were out looking for money to help us do this work from everywhere but the Archdiocese. And finally, and I literally sat down with our Archbishop and said, you know, you've got to put some skin in the game if we're going to continue to do this. So we did get $100,000 from this year's Bishop's annual appeal. Also, I've been very involved in creating partnerships and collaborative efforts locally, statewide, nationally, and internationally. And finally, and this is an important one, I have become this voice of both caution and moderation, as well as enthusiasm and positivity. And that maybe more than any of the rest of the things on this list, I think makes me or puts me in a unique position, because I really am walking with both sides. And we'll go into that a little bit. I do think that oftentimes in this work, and you all may identify with this, that this work is like pushing a rock up a hill while dragging a ball and chain behind you. In other words, the rock is everything that you're trying to do in a world that weighs you down with the not todays or maybe laters. The chain is actually that apathy and disinterest in what you're trying to achieve. And the ball, that ball is actively working against you, trying to keep you from succeeding. And together, all of this can actually end up stopping us in our tracks. But if we're going to keep going to get past all those barriers that actually keep that ball moving up the hill, then we have to start naming those barriers, and we have to define what holds us back. And I think more than anything, this step is going to help those of you, including this helped us, get that extra little oomph we needed to get started. And this list isn't exhaustive. First of all, let me tell you, this is my list. This is the list that I've put together. It's not all the things that you might encounter. And in fact, I haven't encountered all these things, but it's a list that I've put together over the years. It's my best effort at identifying 8 general areas of resistance, and then some specific barriers within each one of those areas of resistance. So for the next little bit, I want to take some time to look at each one of these areas, give you some ideas and some things to maybe overcome the barriers. We don't have time to do a deep dive. I get that. And it's my hope that this is going to help you start a conversation, because more than anything else, you're not going to get anywhere if you don't start having conversations and really addressing these barriers, how you can overcome them. And that's how you're going to continue to be able to do this work. My ideas are meant to help you move forward or think differently about the places where you've hit balls, where you've hit a wall or gotten bogged down. And I'm going to make this general slide and the specific 8 slides that follow this available to you, so you don't have to scribble all this down, but you may want to take some notes of just ideas, things that come to mind as I go through some of this. So let's start with clergy and structure, because I hear all the time about how there's no clergy support, or the way that we're structured doesn't support the work. So I want to take a quick look at some of these barriers and give you a couple of thoughts and ideas around this. I don't know how many of you saw it, but recently there was an article in NCR that actually quoted a climate periodical that talked about the fact that the US bishops aren't talking about this. And one of the biggest things I hear, in fact, I heard it just this week, is that you're not getting support from the bishops or the pastors. Either one or the other might support you, and sometimes neither of them support you. And that clergy are unwilling to make a commitment. I hear this all the time from some of my priests that aren't really into this quite yet. They have this follower, wait and see attitude. There's also a discussion about there are people and priests especially and bishops who are aware of the encyclical and its issues. We hope they've read it, but I can tell you from experience, not even every priest has read the encyclical. But we find that there's a very large number of priests and bishops out there who are unwilling to preach on the spiritual and social obligations. Also, determining who has authority to create the plan or responsibility for implementation of the plan. We also know clergy changes all the time, and sometimes at critical times, like when you're just about to start your new ministry, or you've got money coming in that you're going to use to do retrofit. And it can be because they're reassigned, because they're retiring, because some of them pass away. But the changing of our clergy oftentimes is a barrier where we start going and that happens and we get stopped. And finally, resistance due to heavy workload, time management, or belief that if they talk about it, preach about it, or start the ministry, it's going to affect tithing. So a couple of thoughts on this, and I'm going to try to go really fast because we've got 8 areas. I would tell you this: find a place to start. All of these people, these clergy or people who are leadership in the diocese, find the one that's on your side. Find the one that believes what you believe and start there and leverage them to make inroads into those priests and those bishops. I will tell you this: I have yet to hear that there's any bishop who has actively come out and said, absolutely not, we're not doing this, I don't believe it. But I can tell you, and I know several of the bishops who are like, yeah, that's nice, but I've got other things on my mind, or this isn't my passion, or this isn't where our diocese is right now. But I also know a lot of pastors who are not aligned with the bishop. So if one or the other is on your side, then you can either work ground up with the pastors and the parishes, or work top down from the diocese and the bishops. The whole idea with clergy and structure is don't let them get you down. If you are in a diocese, and I do know one such diocese where Laudato Si has no foothold at all, and what they've been working on is going out into the interfaith and ecumenical community and working with them. So bringing Catholics in their diocese who want to do this work, and they're partnering with the interfaith community. So don't let this stop you, but be aware that these barriers I've presented here and some more that I'm going to present are the things that you have to think creatively about. How are you going to get past those? The next big one that comes, it's right up there with clergy, is politics. And it requires a moderate hand to accompany people through this minefield. The accusations of partisanship or political agenda, the fact that oftentimes the faithful in your diocese believe that your bishop is taking sides with one of the political parties. And that one's hard to get past. But one of the ways that we've done that is to walk a moderate line. In fact, because I live in a state that is very conservative, especially the further north you get, I don't even use the term climate change. I talk to them about the agricultural work they're doing. I talk to them about those things that are near and dear to their hearts that are part of this work. So this partisanship and political agenda, one of the lines I've used a lot to help people is that we have to stop being Republicans and Democrats coming to church, and we have to be Catholics going to the voting booth. And when I start the conversation like that, it kind of levels the field and gets rid of some of that partisanship. We know that there are a number of people who say private faith should stay out of the public square, separation of church and state. There are those that believe the Pope lacks the expertise on the issue. And I do have to remind them that he is a chemist, he is a scientist, but that his role here is really not as a scientist. His role is to present the ideal, to give people this model, this ideal model of which asking them to strive to work toward that. Deniers lack conviction in the Pope's request, and that's oftentimes a huge barrier. Advocacy for this issue is oftentimes dividing parishes and dioceses. And so there may come a point where a pastor or a bishop will ask you to back off on this, and that starts to stop your progress. Environmental cleanup and gardening doesn't change legislation. I've heard that a lot. We don't want to show favoritism or oppose local companies. Like we have Georgia Power, and a lot of people work for them, so we don't want to call them out on what they're doing wrong or give them kudos for what they're doing right, because they're doing some of both. And especially when our faithful are working for those companies. The changes to implement this is going to cost taxpayer money. Rich countries are expected to pay for everything. And don't forget, there are diocesan and parish politics at play. It isn't just our government politics, but diocesan and parish politics, and not everybody is supporting this work. When it comes to politics, I cannot say it enough. The way I have gotten through this minefield is to take a moderate stance, walk with people, meet them where they are, and walk with them where they are. Find what you can agree on. One of the main things that I tell people all the time about the Laudato Si encyclical, when they tell me they don't believe in climate change, 3% of the document is on climate change. Don't throw the whole thing out because you disagree with 3% of it. There's also the issue of hierarchies and priorities in our church. We all know, and we've heard it, and we continue to hear it, about abortion being the most important thing. Everything else we divide out between all the other ministries, but abortion is the number one issue. We have a problem with the definition of what life issues are, and they're not consistent through the parish, through the diocese, actually through the Catholic Church itself. But foremost of that is the environment is not a life issue. We hear that all the time. There's also no understanding of Catholic social teaching's role in living out our faith. So when we refer to Catholic social teaching, people are like, yeah, that's nice. The cost of doing this work is oftentimes considered too high, and there is a lack of no consideration for the mission. So in other words, money over mission. We've all heard that we don't have the money to do this, or if we can't bring in some money, you can't do the mission. But the point is on this, that we have to find ways to put mission first. Also, we hear that the church is responsible for spiritual work, not government or business work. Our priority is saving souls. And while that is a priority, and it is what we should be doing, the saving of those souls is living our faith as part of that living of the gospel. So, and the priority is on building ministries and committees that are widely accepted, that are expected, that what everybody wants to do instead of what is needed. So where are the priorities and what is the hierarchy? I will tell you this, if you don't know the hierarchy in your parish or in your diocese, or you don't know what the priorities are of your bishop or your pastor, find out, because that's how you're going to be able to find out which direction you need to plan to overcome those barriers that are in your path. You have to be aware of the current situation. How many of us know the diocese is dealing with scandals and lawsuits, and it's taking the focus from everything else we're trying to do? It takes the time and the money away from the ministry work that we're asked to do. Or the diocese is going through or has just completed bankruptcy. There have been budget cuts that have been made, and we can't afford to do this work. Finances are being highly scrutinized. The faithful are not going to be okay with us spending money on electric charging stations when the poor don't have something to eat. So we have to make sure we are able to look at what the current situation is. Parishes and schools are being combined and closed. Dioceses and parishes have reductions in workforce. Where I am, there are new and existing positions that are vacant. We haven't been able to fill them. And I've heard this time and time again, as soon as we get the position filled, then we'll talk to you about what you want to deal with, Kat. So what I had to figure out is, okay, they don't want to talk to me about that. What else and who else can I talk to that is in place? Where can I move? They don't want to interfere with the capital campaign that's going on, the current ministry fundraiser that's going on, or the already stretched community that we don't want to ask them to give more. So that time, talent, and treasure, if treasure is an issue, then look at time and talent. Sometimes we forget there are three parts to that. Leverage the one that people feel like they can give. Also, people are tired and this work is hard. We know a lot of people that don't care about the issue. So getting them on board is actually one of those barriers that sort of set it to the side, because getting those people on board isn't going to move the needle. Go talk to the people that are ready to get on board, that are interested. And I'm talking the young people. I have an intern from Cristo Rey High School that literally is looking at the last 30 years worth of videos that young people have made on the environment and getting ready to make a presentation to our bishops on the voice of young people over the years on this issue. And finally, the one that people are, I mean, you've all heard this. COVID slowed us down. It stopped the work. It got in the way, and we're not fully back yet. So when we get fully back, we'll get started on this. And people just aren't willing to volunteer as much, or we don't have as many volunteers after COVID. So COVID's kind of an easy barrier to put up. But I would tell you that there are tons of ways to work around that, the same way we learned to work around COVID for the year plus that we were all stuck at home. Let's talk for just a minute about purpose and focus, because undefined and poorly articulated purpose and focus are some of the less difficult barriers to address. But if you don't address them, you can't move them. They're like concrete blocks in front of you. So you'll find that people only want to focus on the education and awareness part, or they only want to focus on the action part, and you can't seem to get any cohesion. That's okay. Let them focus on what they want to focus on. If you can get them focusing on that, I tell people all the time, everybody doesn't have to do the same thing. And if there's no cohesion and people are all doing different things, at least they're doing something. So we don't know where to start, so we haven't. That one's a huge thing that comes up, and you all know that the journey of 1,000 steps starts with the first. We can't decide whether to focus on the entire encyclical or the chapters or something else entirely. Choose, pick something, pick a focus. Also, it's all about education and awareness, but we're just not moving to action. Well, we'll talk about that in just a minute because that has a lot to do with strategy. Also, that there are too many different directions. Some people want us to focus local or regional or national or global, and we don't know where to go. Again, pick one. This whole idea of there are lots of different ways to go is great if you have lots of people to do something that are ready to do it. But if you only have one or two people in a parish that want to move, then have them choose what they're passionate about doing. They don't have to do everything else. Dioceses want top-down committees and parishes want ground-up ministries, and those don't always meet. And we find even in my diocese that individuals and groups are all doing their own thing and there's no oversight. And you know what? It doesn't matter whether it's Laudato Si or anything else. That has always happened. It'll continue to happen. Just do what you can do. And some of the stuff, you just have to let it go and hope that you can rein it in as you move along. And the other thing is never getting started because we can't get permission. We have to keep stopping because we get forgiveness for what we've already done. You know, the whole thing, do I ask permission or do I ask forgiveness? I've done both. I don't tell everybody go out and do it and ask forgiveness later, but I can tell you that if you have a good relationship with your bishop, I do, but he's not always available. So I know him well enough to know there are some things I can do and get permission later because I know he's going to be okay with it. And also we can't get ahead of the clergy. And I've used that one too. People are ready to go. And my bishop, we were changing from Cardinal Gregory to Archbishop Hartmeyer, and I couldn't get out ahead of him. I had to wait for him to make a statement before I could go on making statements and giving interviews on something. And so that's just a matter of really getting to know those decision makers and what their purpose and focus is. So when it comes to audience, the idea of defining your audience is really good, but it's like moving targets. You define it one day and it totally changes the next day. Also, what audience are you, or what entity are you an audience for? Like, I need to know, who am I going out and helping? Whose audience am I? So if you don't know who your audience is, the diocese, the parish, the green ministries, the faithful, or you don't know how to support the different audiences or what's available for the audiences, then you got to stop. That's a big thing, is stop. And again, pick one. We have great resources that support the laity, but not the parish ministries. Parish leadership wants green ministry, but they're not thinking about the individual families. Only green ministry is participating in anything that we do. We don't have any families out there. All of these sort of things are a matter of just knowing who your audience is. If your audience is just your creation care team, then go with that. You don't have to reach everybody. But if your audience is also your whole parish or your whole diocese, the laity, the faithful in your entire diocese, and they want this information, don't forget them. Don't leave them out, because you can really use them to become a vibrant Laudato Si diocese. Also, we hear about invitation. We've asked people to participate from the pulpit with little to no response. Well, a lay person asked, and if Father had asked, it would have been different. Father asked, but he didn't really know what we were doing. So it really didn't matter who asked. We were getting no response from the pulpit. Or we made calls and sent invitations, but nobody's showing up for our meetings. Or it isn't working because the bishop didn't ask the clergy to do it, or Father didn't ask the people with the widest spheres of influence to participate. Feelings got hurt because I wasn't asked to be a part of this. So what we have to do, again, it's kind of on the political side, walk that moderate path, be willing to apologize if that's what it takes to get people, to bring people back into the movement. We also hear that only the people who are already concerned are participating, or only the people who are experts are being asked to participate. And I had that conversation with my team today when they started talking about, we need to ask so-and-so to do this and so-and-so to do this. And I said, I would disagree. I say, let's put out a memo to all the parishes and ask people to self-identify if they want to do this. we don't know everybody. We have no idea what all the people in the pews are thinking. So let's give them that opportunity. There are so many Catholic organizations out there addressing Laudato Si. You are, the Archdiocese of Atlanta is, all these different Catholic Climate Covenant, USCCB, the Laudato Si Action Platform at the Vatican. So who's the expert? We don't know who we should trust or who's best for our audience. Or we don't know how to vet the outside resources. There are tons of great outside resources that we can be using from the EPA, and we have one called Drawdown Georgia. These are great, but my parishes are like, Kat, you need to post a list because we don't know who's been vetted. We don't know who we're allowed to use. So we're almost done. Just a couple more here. Messaging and communication. This one's vital. This is one of the messiest areas of barriers, because from who's in charge to how we say things, from open lines of communication to identifying what resources we're going to share, this is this tangled web of barriers. So here's the big one. We don't know, or no one can decide who's in charge of communications for this work. This was big for us when we started working. Communications thought they were communicating everything, and they literally left Justice and Peace Ministries out of the loop completely. When the first Laudato Si action plan was being written and gone through and all of that, our ministry didn't even know it was happening. People don't understand the words that the document is using. When you start talking about integral ecology, using the term Laudato Si, I always, when I'm presenting, say Laudato Si, care for creation. When we talk about encyclical, depending on who I'm talking to, I'll use letter, that sort of thing, because the words are unknown or foreign or too theological. We also know, as with the encyclicals, the flowery, churchy words that are used. Some people are like, my husband would be one of those, lifetime Catholic, and he's like, yeah, I'm out after about the first 2 pages. But also the whole idea with this, that there's inflammatory language, and that one gets thrown about with the politics. Words like climate change stop some people from reading it or supporting it. And some people have said, well, the Pope's accusing us of not caring and being selfish. I oftentimes tell people, really, is that what you read into it? It also, probably the number one thing that I hear is that he's asking us to make changes that we just don't think we can make or we're ready to make. And my answer to that is, that's okay. Let's talk about it. Not saying, well, you need to get started on those right away, because people are not going to make those changes until they have taken that information. And we work on the premise of, we have to change hearts before we can change minds, which then change behaviors. So also, I start a lot of my things with, the Pope wrote you a letter. Did you read it? All 184 pages, 246 paragraphs. And that kind of stops people in their tracks, because they're thinking this, but they're not expecting me to say it. And so, we recognize that people may not have read the whole thing. So I say, we understand that's a lot to do. There's a lot of language in it. How about we come and spend 45 minutes with you and give you the top 10 takeaways, the things you can talk with people at the soccer field or at your work water cooler or at the gym, that sort of thing. But also that it focuses on so many issues, and it's too much for one ministry, or the asks and the actions are just way too difficult for any one person or entity to do. All the time. Can't get my Bible study group to do this because it's too secular. The Pope is talking to everyone. It doesn't really have a Catholic message. The traditional spiritual practices are missing. And those kind of make me laugh, because I do know where those are. And I can oftentimes say to people, really, because on this page, this is exactly what the Pope is talking about when he asks us to pray on this. Also, we don't know how to get the message to the parishes. We don't have a way for the parishes to report back to us on what they're doing. And there's nothing in place for our bishops and pastors to know what's going on. So it's this whole melee of stuff that's happening, which is awesome, but there's no organization around communication. And we can't find the resources to meet our language needs. We need something in Vietnamese. We need something in our in both Spanish, and Spanish has different dialogues that we have different groups of people. We have the Portuguese, you know, the Brazilian community, that sort of thing. So we don't have everything in all the different languages. So we aren't doing a good job of inviting everybody in. Also, when we look at this, we don't know if the resources are being vetted correctly. We don't know where to find specific issue resources, if it's solar, if it's on the whether or not our ash pits are lined, you know, that sort of thing, or we're unsure of what resources we're supposed to be using. We also finally then have strategy and action. And navigating these barriers around strategy are what keep us from action. And that's what tonight's about. And I am just about done, I promise. With this, we only have a concept. It's not working. We don't know how to write a plan. Publishing a plan means we have to update it. We don't have the money to publish a plan. We don't have the time to do it. We don't have the knowledge of how to do an e-plan. Our action plan only lists what to do, not how to do it. We don't have a work plan. So we don't know how to, when to, or who's going to do what. People only want single, easy to do actions. We don't know how to move people from the simple to the difficult actions. Can individual change happen, or does it have to be institutional change? People don't have an experience with climate issues. So I was talking to somebody in Minnesota and they said, our people have no idea about all these climate issues with the oceans and with the hurricanes and all this sort of stuff. They don't even have a lot of water issues. The interesting thing with them, the number one group that's interested in the environment is the Snowmobile Association, because they've seen the difference in snowfall. So again, strategize. Who are your advocates out there? Who are you going to get on your side? The other thing is, people have said this document is more theoretical and we want to talk about real change. We want to do advocacy. Well, many people say we just can't get the urgency. There are so many other issues that are more important to our faithful, and there's no understanding of why this is a priority for the poor, the vulnerable, and the marginalized. This has been a ton of information. I have thrown this out at lightning speed. And as I said in the beginning, I will make these charts available to you. So don't worry about that. And I know some of you are feeling overwhelmed at facing all these barriers and trying to figure out what you need to do. So I encourage you to think of the old adage, think outside the box. And then I want you to throw the box out. Our work really is about passion. And it so often happens with passionate people, finding creative and those unthought of solutions to the pesky problems that have been plaguing us. That's what creative people and passionate people do. Don't let this work quench your enthusiasm. Don't stop trying to get past those barriers that you're going up against. We've heard it 1,000 times in meetings and political speeches at conferences and corporate feel-good events. Failure is not an option. Rah, rah, go team. Well, I say this, that's a lie. Don't believe a word of it. Failure is always an option. In fact, statistically speaking, it is the most likely option. I would even go so far as to say it's the reason why more Laudato Si action plans aren't in place. We fail to persevere. We fail to keep trying. How often do we keep trying to create and promote new programs, and when it doesn't work, we quietly give up and we just move on? I've done that. I will tell you that I've told myself it wasn't my fault, that it wasn't meant to work, it wasn't the right time. And my all-time favorite, God has other plans. Most of us have probably at one time chosen to not try again. I've had enough. This is whatever, but this work is different for me. It's a moral imperative, right? So like our very lives could depend on it. They do depend on it. But when we choose not to try again, it could be that I'm failing humanity. I'm failing the common good. I'm failing God. And those that don't try are actually worse off because they've lost the opportunity to learn from their mistakes. Some of my failures around this topic have been epic, but they've taught me a lot. More than anything else, they've taught me that when I'm passionate about something, God's plan for me is to learn from my mistakes. So I know it's like 2 minutes and we need to give people a chance to ask some questions, but I want you to consider this. Whoops. Success is the outcome of all the processes you've gone through, all the places you've discovered were wrong and didn't go back there again, all the places you've discovered were right and went through, and all the things that you learned. This, more than anything, I want you to remember, in Atlanta, we didn't just learn from our own mistakes, we've learned from everybody else's mistakes. It's been said that every failure is a stepping stone, and success comes from fixing those mistakes rather than not making them at all. And we've made and continue to make plenty of mistakes. And so we have literally begged, borrowed, and figuratively stolen to get where we are today. No one goes it alone. And I don't want you to think that you have to. I operate on the premise that I can't work any harder. I have to work smarter. Just yesterday, somebody reached out to me and I said, we can do this, but you got to put in the work. That sounds like time, and most of us don't have that time. So we have to work smarter. We have to build capacity. You have to find people to help you do what needs to be done. And that's one of the barriers that I had to work to overcome, finding passionate people like myself to help me do this type of work. The good news is they're out there and they really, really want to help you. So I've told you I live in Atlanta, and anyone who's driven around the perimeter knows that you have to navigate about 6 to 8 lanes of traffic at any given time. And every so often, like now, they throw in some road construction and then bring out the barrels and the cones. And I can't just get out and move those to get where I want to go. So I have to figure out how to work around them and in spite of them and with them. So metaphorically, I change things around. We all do it. We do it all the time, usually unconsciously. Consider the options, the alternatives, and make a new plan. So consider your options and your alternatives. Make a plan to help you get where you want to go, but you have to believe that you need to go there. Refuse to take no for an answer. Just imagine what we could accomplish if we found a way around everything that holds us back. Laudato Si would be so much more than a plan. It would become a lived reality. Whew. Okay, there you go. Thank you guys so much. I think they're going to do some Q&A, and just let me know. I can bring that list back up if it will help for the conversation.
Wow, Kat, that was just amazing. Thank you. There's a lot to unpack, but I think you're right. Being in there for the long haul, I'm a lay Spiritan, and we started talking about the encyclical when it came out, and you do what you can when you can, and being in it for the long haul, and kind of going from there. Thankfully, we have 1 or 2 people who are really passionate and kind of keep us on track, like you.
I can tell you with this, and I probably should have started with this, that the only way this is going to work is it is relationship based. So if you aren't working with others, if you are all by yourself, there is somebody else across the country that's all by themselves too. Find them and work together on this. So it is about relationships.
I was actually trying to hit the clapping icon, but I have some comments anyway. And I wanted to, I think that much of the presentation was really, most of it was very much on target. And especially what interested me was the political part. And I think that I think this is a big issue. I think that certainly, I think it's true that I think the majority of the bishops in our country are still John Paul / Benedict bishops. I think they are, most of them, partisan to the Republican Party, because as you said, if abortion is the #1 issue and the Republican Party presents itself as the anti-abortion party, then it stands to reason that bishops are going to favor them over the Democrat, which in its current Democratic Party, which in its current manifestation kind of puts itself forward as the abortion rights party. And I think that one of the problems is that it's not, it's that the bishops are afraid of, well, not afraid maybe, but concerned about alienating their political allies in the Republican Party, who might feel betrayed if the bishops were to, because the Republican Party is also a climate denier party. Okay, that's the way the majority of them present themselves also. So they might feel betrayed. I mean, the bishops might think this, that their allies in the Republican Party might feel betrayed if the bishops are siding with with what they see as a liberal Democrat position, which is to say climate change. And I remember a week before Laudato Si came out in the Pittsburgh Diocese, which is where I'm at, and Bishop Zubik expressed concern that I guess they get an advanced copy or whatever, that the encyclical might alienate people that are working in the fossil fuel industry, including people that are executives in the fossil fuel industry, and I'm sure that's a real concern. And also, I believe that probably they're concerned about their allies, what they see as their allies with the abortion issue and other family type issues in the Republican Party. Now, I think I agree also that it should not become a partisan issue. It should not be Republicans versus Democrats, because one of the mistakes that the Democrats make is that they think that the Democrats are really good on this issue, and they're really not. I mean, they talk the talk, but they're still taking money from the same polluters and the same fossil fuel industries that are also funding the Republican Party.
So if I could make a comment on this. So what I just heard is certainly, I've heard both sides of that argument. I would tell you that the time spent on the focus on that takes away time spent that you could be doing this with a different focus or a different way. So as soon as somebody starts the conversation like you did, and not that your points aren't good points, but what I try to do when this happens is, instead of what all we disagree on, is, okay, what can we agree on? What can we start working on? And I have advocates that I know of that are out there doing what you're talking about, but my job really is to try to bring as many people into the fold as possible. So I look for the things we can agree on.
Chad, if I could ask a question. From your experience, I mean, in Pittsburgh, and I'm sure every place, there are definitely people, individuals, and there's groups that are quite active, in supporting Laudato Si and in the ecological movement. But if you're trying to break into a parish that's not particularly involved, or in fact our diocese, are there a couple of issues that you found to be a little easier to get some traction with than others?
Okay, so there are a couple things. First of all, I would tell you that's too big of a question because we know that the different parts of the diocese and have different views or find themselves in different places. I guess the way I would say that is, my number one thing is to kind of find out what's the number one ministry that a parish is doing. And if that number one ministry is walking with moms in need, I've got my foot in the door, because I can talk about poverty and how, if we're not taking care of this earth, how are we making sure that they have enough to eat? Not talking about climate change, because quite honestly, my ladies that come in on Walking with Moms in Need don't even know climate change. They don't even think about it. So find out what ministry is the number one ministry in that parish or in that diocese, and find your way in the back door of that ministry. That would be my number one way of doing that.
I already put in the chat, Kate, what's you consider your greatest success in your diocese, without going outside the diocese? The fact that you're collaborating with the Vatican is great, but within the diocese.
So within the diocese, I think the number one thing that I look at is that I have moved the needle on the number of clergy that are now actively listening to and trying to be a part of this movement. When I started on this, I literally had 5 priests who raised their hand and said, yeah, I'd like to talk about this, when it first came out. And now I have probably about 80% of my priests have sat down and talked to me. Now, it doesn't mean they're doing everything, but to me, I've worked on that changing hearts. I've gotten in there, and I am really proud of the fact that the part that goes with that is that from all the work we've done, we have great relationships with even those who disagree with us. Even those who disagree with us are not actively opposing us and trying to keep us from doing this work. Makes me feel good about it.
There's
Great.
three hands up, Sister Barb, Joyce, and Sister Lynn. So how about if we hear from them, and then please others raise hands or put the question in the chat.
Well, and Jim Jarrett has his hand up as well.
Okay.
I was just going to invite, we have a whole group that's with us this evening that they've been studying Laudato Si. And I think it would be interesting to hear from some of them, their reflection back to us of what they heard, being that they're committed to at least study. That's one of the first steps. So any of you willing to do that?
Well, there are 5 of us here at St. Teresa of Kolkata Parish in the South Hills. And we started in the fall to just study Laudato Si. So this is just our first meeting, but we have all kinds of ideas. We try to make it like a study group where we learn the spirituality and get passionate that way. So we are just on the 3rd chapter. So our aim is to go each meeting each month to talk about one of the chapters. But the importance of action keeps popping in to the discussion. We start talking about, what patriarch somebody said, and then we're like, well, maybe we could have a garden. I think people want to do something. The studying is important. As Merton said, you need action and contemplation. So we haven't even confronted these political problems or anything like that. We're like a little seed in the parish, and every month we send an invitation. The most we had 10 people at the first meeting, and there are other people who are interested. I'm just thinking right now we need to reach out and find some more of those people you're talking about, because I know they're out there and they do want to help us.
So let me tell you what I'm hearing from you though.
Okay.
I want you to change. We're only on the 3rd chapter we're on the 3rd chapter. And we are really excited about this. And when instead of there are only 10 of us, there are 10 of us. Imagine what we could do if more came. So really change just because I can hear your enthusiasm, but I can also hear you holding that back. Let it out, because anybody who knows me, they're like, my boss says to me all the time, he goes, I've never met anybody who's so enthusiastic about doing their work. So I love what you're doing. The other thing I would encourage you with this, you're reading along and you say, oh gosh, maybe we should have a garden. It's okay to stop and go start a garden. That's okay. Don't think you can either do this or that. Do both and. But yay, good for you. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Joyce?
Thank you, Kat. You gave us so much to think about. In our parish, which is St. Mary Magdalene here in the Diocese of Pittsburgh, we have had interest in, and many people have read the encyclical. We've made it a part of our Respect Life Month and concentration. And I think we're ready to pull together an ad hoc group, a group that's going to go forward here on the topic. But my question is, are there pros and cons about like starting from scratch? Of course, we know our situation better than people in Atlanta would know. Or would it be better to take an already developed plan like you have in Atlanta and go through it and say, well, what fits for us? And kind of glean some possibilities there and then build on that.
So look at the talents of your group. I happen to have my Laudato Si initiative, which is our work plan and our 7 to 10 year plan. I have corporate consultants and engineers who know how to make a work plan. And they're the ones who we did this. But for parishes, the Diocese of Arlington has an amazing parish model. We have this great diocesan model. Don't think we're all that when it comes to the parishes. We're doing great things at a diocesan level, but I'm struggling at the parish level. So I actually have a talk set up with the Diocese of Arlington to really learn from them how they are engaging at the parish level. But I think what it really comes down to is, do you have a group who is able to kind of build this for you, or do you have a group that really has other strengths so it makes sense to bring in something that's already put together? I think it's a question you need to ask the group to make that decision. And it's kind of one of those things, like if they go, well, we should really do this ourselves, then the next question is, so who's going to take the lead on that? Who's going to be responsible? When you start asking those questions, oftentimes they're going to start leaning to, let's take a look at that model that's already out there. But it depends upon what the strengths are of your group.
Thank you.
Sister Lynn?
Okay, thank you, Kat, for all your wisdom and insight, really, and I can just sense your passion. I did put in the chat, I would say 15 years ago, I was able to have a conversation with our bishop about, what is he doing to try to initiate some of the sustainable practices or even policies in the diocese. And, at that point, they were just beginning to talk about the new diocesan structure. And he said, well, and I at least give him this credit. He said, I really don't know a lot about it. Could you educate me? Which is a plus. But he also said, we probably won't do a lot until we get this process in place, which actually isn't even finished yet. So I thought at least I made my efforts there. However, I'm finding that a lot of Catholic churches, because of the clergy, are not really engaged or even want to think about it. And so I thought, well, that's not going to stop us as a religious congregation who have made a commitment to it. And so what we've done is actually looked at where the energy is in our region. Mm-hmm. And we partner and collaborate with Lutheran churches, evangelicals, so we have this great network of other religious denominations who have made a commitment to it. And if we become the only Catholic entity associated with sustainability, that's okay too, because at least we get the Catholic message out there of this document. And so I think for me, I've learned that, maybe not having some kind of response from our own diocese or parishes doesn't need to stop you, because you can still be about what the document entails, and you just want to keep spreading that message. So
that's so cool. We encountered that early on with just not, mm-hmm. We had the early adopters who were all in, started their energy audits, but most of the diocese was not. We reached out to the Baptist church. In fact, we reached out to mm-hmm. Dr. King's church, and we said, hey, we have this really cool plan on sustainability. And they read our, the Archdiocese of Atlanta's mm-hmm. action plan. They adopted it. Ebenezer Baptist Church adopted our plan. Mm-hmm. Then we went back, and don't let anybody tell you priests aren't a little bit competitive. Because when we started saying, yeah, Ebenezer Baptist has adopted our plan and they're putting it into place, a few of the priests right there in downtown Atlanta went, wait, what? And then they became interested. So leverage that back too. Don't forget to let the rest of your diocese know what the interfaith and ecumenical community is doing, because like all of us, there's a little bit of, wait a minute, we don't want to be the last, we don't want to get left out or left behind. But kudos to you for not letting it stop you. Jared?
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Kat, for sharing some of your experiences with us this evening. I kind of want to circle back to the piece that we highlighted earlier about relationship, in particular as it relates to integral ecology. I think these encouraging solar panels, encouraging electric vehicles and things like that are important things to do, but by and large, most of us may not have those skill set, right? But we are relational And we can, Kat, you threw out the example of the mother in poverty. What does it look like for us to go in or to walk within a company those who live in a red lined area where there's absolutely no tree canopy or it's a food desert?
Mhm.
What does it look like for us to stick our hands into the soil? How many of us on this call within the last week have actually put our hands into the soil as we prepare for winter? How many of us have allowed ourselves to be distanced from a deeper sense of spirituality with relationship and integral ecology? And I say these things because I recognize them in myself as well. And I think that relationship piece, in juxtaposition to the top down or the bottom up, if we can't, from the bottom up, if we're not in relationship, we're not changing hearts. We're not allowing our own hearts to be changed. And I think that's, someone mentioned contemplation and action earlier. And I think if we're not coming from that place, then we're going to falter and we're going to fail. And as you said, failing's fine as long as we learn from it and we continue to move forward. I've got 600 tree seeds in my basement right now in a refrigerator because it's a little hobby, and I'm gonna give them away to friends in the spring when they start sprouting, right? To people I know and that sort of thing. And I don't say that whatever, just have fun with it. Be creative.
And you are exactly right. One of our contractors just spoke. He actually worked for 4 different governors in the state of California, both parties, as their sustainability guy. I mean, I've got some top-notch people that I'm working with here, but he just spoke at a conference, at 2 different conferences out in California. And one of the things that he really talked about that just kept coming up again and again, and that I'm hearing across the country and across the globe, is it's about relationships, and you've got to have fun with it. This, yes, the climate change and all this is something that's weighing heavy on us, but we cannot let it become so burdensome and so heavy that we forget about the joy that we have in relationship and in having fun in relationship and having fun. I know that one of our creation care teams, when they meet their ministry, the Bible study has to come over almost every week and say, you guys are being too loud over here, because they're talking and they're doing relationship. But I also want to tell you this. I have family members who absolutely are climate deniers, all this sort of stuff, but they care passionately about the earth and about all this other stuff. So what we do is find those places where we can joyfully work together and be in relationship. And the last part to what I would say is, there's also, and it reminded me when you said this with all of your little seedlings, is it is also okay. I'm an extrovert. I'm probably over the top. People tell me if I was a coffee drinker or a caffeine drinker that I'd probably be scraping me off the ceiling. But I also believe in the quiet, measured, constant steps towards a goal. So everything doesn't have to be splashy and out there. Little bitty tiny steps are also reasons to rejoice. So, for every little seed that gets planted, for every quiet, unknown, unrecognized step that we take, there is joy to be found in that. And I don't want anybody to ever think that that is less important than the big things. So thank you for bringing that out about relationships.
Kellyanna?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm happy to be here. This has been incredibly informative and has my brain working. I'm thinking about a lot of things, which is really great. So I have a question that's on topic, but maybe slightly adjacent to what we're talking about. I work for an environmental nonprofit, and we are not affiliated with any specific religious organization. However, the action that we're working on we are trying to reach out to faith groups, interfaith groups specifically. So this has been really great for me to listen to in that regard. So I'm wondering if you or anyone in the group has any thoughts about how maybe a group that might not be specifically religious or Catholic could better reach out to Catholic communities or interfaith communities, if that's something that feels appropriate, or how to better do that.
So let me tell you how our first action plan came about. A group of interfaith, well, not even, they definitely weren't all Catholic. A group of environmental scientists at the University of Georgia heard the Pope was putting this out. And of course, they're all about the environment. They approached our Archbishop, led by a Catholic scientist, but they together approached our Archbishop and said, hey, we want to do something. What can we do? Could we maybe put together an action plan? That's how our action plan started. It didn't come from us. It came from outside, from a university setting. We also work with Interfaith Power and Light a lot, but through them, we have gotten very involved with like Georgia Tech, our technical school that's doing all this work around environmental study and all of that. We've gotten very much a part of the whole, I mean, Ray C. Anderson, his family, they're Catholic and they're part of our diocese, which makes it nice with the Ray C. Anderson Foundation. But we have allowed them, they challenged us. The reason we have a work plan is because they came to us and said, if you're going to do this work, act like you mean it. And they literally said to us, if we don't give you any money, are you still going to do this work? And I literally looked, and the bishop was in the room with me, and I think it took him aback a little. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, in fact, I'll probably have to work a little harder and all that sort of stuff. But challenge it. I encourage nonprofits to challenge us, and when they said to us, you need to do this like you mean it. Like act like this is important. Because of that, we put together about a 60-page Fortune 500 style work plan. When I gave it to our COO, he looked at this and he said, oh my gosh, any Fortune 500 company would love this type of a work plan for what you're going to accomplish. Challenge the parishes, challenge the diocese, say, we're doing this. Are you going to join us? Are you going to be part of this? We've heard you guys have a Laudato Si document. We've heard that you care about creation and sustainability. What are you doing? We're doing this. Want to join with us? I mean, really challenge them, because our Laudato Si action plan and our work plan came from outsiders challenging us to be the best that we could be.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Don?
Yeah, I really like what I'm hearing here in so many ways. Just one thing sort of jumped out at me with several different people talking about relationships, and thinking about, how Native Americans really think of this is one of the primary relationships is just listening to creation itself. Mm-hmm. And, somebody mentioned putting your hands in the soil. And I'll tell you a little story. There was a young couple that was leasing about an acre of our land after I retired to grow vegetables. And, we've always taken Sunday completely off, because we discovered early on, really, you just work yourself to death if you work 7 days a week. And I said, but I don't object to you being here on Sunday. Just walk around. And when you think about what that does, it refreshes you, and you begin to listen to creation when you do that.
Do you all have a green cemetery or a green burial? Anything there? So
there are some, yes.
That is one of the best things we ever did. Is we did something totally on Honey Creek Woodlands, which is where we have the green burial. It's also across from the monastery. And we encourage people to just go out there and walk. Take your dogs, take your kids, go out and walk out there. And, people are like, okay, and it's like, this is part of Laudato Si. This is part of that
And-
integral ecology, this relationship between people and planet.
And as much as, you know, we, you know, the relationship that occurs at each and every liturgy, you know, there is a liturgy of a relationship with nature itself. They say that the first Bible is nature. That's our first teacher. And that, you know, I think too, to one of our local school districts, they unfortunately, they don't have it anymore, but they used to go up to have all fourth graders in the entire school district go up and spend a weekend at an environmental center at a Lutheran camp north of here. And the amazing experiences those kids have. And that is, you know, specifically, it's encouraging that relationship to nature. And when you have a relationship of that sort, I always like to say, you don't want to hurt those that you love. And when you develop that relationship, then everything else falls out from that. Your action plan works on a personal level, on a family level, on a church level, and on a societal level, all because you don't want to destroy what you love.
And you brought up an important thing, and that is, don't overlook parts of the community that you think might not be a part of this. Our disabilities community, and especially, and we have 50 years now that our disabilities ministry has had a camp, and they do this camp in nature, which you would think with wheelchairs and all this other stuff. But don't overlook the fact that this is a group that once a year they're convening with nature. So use that to help them give voice to that relationship that they have. And man, can they be a message out to others in your community. So it's not always the poor, the vulnerable and the marginalized also play a part in this, not just in how they're affected, but the message that they can spread on behalf of what we're doing with Laudato Si. So don't overlook those little niche communities. There's a lot you can get from them.
Paula, do we have time for one more?
Yeah, I think Barb has her hand up. We have a minute or two, Barb.
Come on. I just wanted to say that very often white people think that people of color are not concerned about the environment. And we have a number of African-American environmental groups here in Pittsburgh. I don't know that people know that, but just to put that out.
And they are, I mean, you know, one of the biggest things we know is that we talk about people of color not being worried about that, but look at the Amazonian Synod, look at the fact we started this with the whole understanding and acknowledgement of land. Our indigenous people here in the United States are probably some of the strongest supporters of this. And yet we sit there and say that, you know, those minority groups are not as interested in all this. There's a reason why we did our Laudato Si action plan in Spanish, and we are currently working to get it into Francophone, so French as well as Vietnamese. And we have a brand new Chinese group that have said, hey, well, we don't mind. We're happy to translate it into Chinese as well. So man, do not overlook any group of people.
Well, gosh, thank you again, Kat. Thank you for all the comments and just sharing that the people who were on the call did today. Do you want a minute or two to kind of wrap everything up for us tonight?
I think here's what I would say to all of you. The fact that you're here, I find encouraging. I also find the fact that you're here this joyful celebration. It's encouraging. You really want to know more and do more. But I also think we so often forget to celebrate. And even when it seems like all that's in front of us are barriers and roadblocks and hurdles, and we're working so hard and we're tired and all that, find a reason to celebrate, because this work, you need to celebrate. It doesn't matter what work you're doing, you need to be able to celebrate all of those successes. But I would say, even if things are totally unsuccessful, we had a couple years ago, it was during the pandemic, and we had literally lost all the momentum that we had going. When the pandemic hit, we lost momentum. And we invited our chaplain, who's one of our auxiliary bishops, and a group of us who had still been meeting and still, I mean, we took the whole year of the pandemic to write our work plan. And we gathered at somebody's house, and she had found sustainably made wine. And we sat and we had a meal together, and we celebrated just what we had accomplished so far, even though momentum had been lost. And after that, it was like we'd been fed. We had a meal together. We celebrated. We came together in relationship. We reminded ourselves why we were doing this work. And we said, we're not going to let this get us down. We're not going to take no for an answer. And it doesn't matter if it's one little seed that we plant, or if we were to tomorrow have the entire archdiocese involved in this work. It doesn't matter how big or small our successes are. Never forget to celebrate the successes. And if you can do that, that will be what sustains you in sustainability work. As we move forward, I also want to encourage all of you, reach out to each other, learn from each other, lean on each other. I'm here. My Archbishop actually told me about a year ago, he said that I want to make sure you're okay with the fact that I'm spending time, so much time, with the Vatican work and with this work around the country. And he said, that's what being a disciple is. You aren't just meant to share what you do in a box. Remember that think outside the box and then throw the box away comment? He told me that what he finds most amazing about this is that it's my willingness to talk to you guys. My phone number is out there, my email's out there. You guys call me, let me know, because I'm going to tell you, it's a little bit selfish. There is very rarely that I don't come away from a conversation having learned from all of you as well. So lean on each other and feel free to give me a call. I tell people all the time, I am not a subject matter expert on very much, but I'm pretty good at putting people together and convening groups. So let's work together. Let's do some work around this topic, and let's overcome some of the barriers together.
Paula, there's a very kind of hopeful comment in the chat. Could I read it?
Sure, please.
I've recently been asked to participate in a Laudato Si effort at St. Paul's Monastery on the south side of Pittsburgh with the Passionist Fathers. The provincial has directed all the monasteries in his province, which is all of the eastern US and the Caribbean, to have a Laudato Si program. I really appreciate all the good advice and experience that has been shared tonight.
The Passionists are pretty amazing, and they've been leading the way on a lot of stuff. So yay, Passionists.
They're working in the spirit of Tom Barry.